I mean, I also look worse without facial hair, so it's not.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe people would disagree. I'm not sure.
I don't know if people are tuning in exactly to see whether I have facial hair or not. I hope they're tuning in, but
they're definitely tuning in for your Snoopy blanket because that's what they want to see. The Snoopy blanket Taylor Swift cup combo that's what people are here for. The vibes.
They video, see those two things, and they know good NBA analysis is about to follow.
This is a series we like to call Hot Hand Minis. These are shorter form pod episodes where Geoff and I get together to discuss a single topic. And for this one, I think we have a very interesting conversation going on social media, inspired really by seemingly benign signing by the Knicks, the quiet signing of Cam Payne to a 1-year vet minimum deal. The question has become, what does this mean for the Knicks guard rotation, for Deuce McBride, for Tyler Kolek? But more importantly, from a hot hand theory perspective, it's brought some interesting concepts into the forefront, a basketball philosophy perspective. What should this signing mean given the Knicks' current roster construction? Geoff, the other night you had a few, should I say, like sobering words on the Strickland postgame show where you express your view on what should happen here. But I think we should talk more about it because I think this is really worth diving into the weeds about with regard to roles, trade-offs versus, of overall impact versus skill sets, traditional modes of thinking versus some less conventional modes of thinking about the game. But yeah, first, I just want to hear from you, and maybe you could talk a little bit about your view on the Cam Payne acquisition and whether you think, given the Knicks roster at this stage, July 2024, where we are right now, the Knicks should be planning to play Cam Payne behind Brunson or Deuce McBride or Tyler Kolek or some other combination. Just like, where are you at with things? What are you thinking?
Sobering was a good word. That was nice, subtle. I had a couple. I had a little bit to drink. But I didn't say anything I didn't mean. I was probably just more abrasive than I should have been.
That's ridiculous. That's preposterous. Like, that's terrible. It's fucking ludicrous.
So
you get a pass. No worries. It's
I'm allowed to do it.
You're drunk every day, according to some Strickland comments.
According to some followers. Yeah, I sound exactly the same. Let's just dive right into it. I think it's actually an interesting conversation. I just wish the conversation would be allowed to be had. So that's let's start there because my perspective is very simple. I'm just going to lay out my perspective so that we can dive into the dissenting position and we can actually try to develop it because other people don't really seem that interested in developing it. They just are saying stuff and then kind of half committing. My position is that when the Knicks are fully healthy, their backup point guard and their guard rotation, their role is going to be, the impact of their role is going to be dictated by a few things that don't really have anything to do with what's being talked about. I think mostly it's going to be shooting and connective passing and defense. I think those are the three huge indicators of what will be an impactive backup point guard. So, there's a world where Cam Payne comes in and Thibs likes him for whatever reason, he plays. He shot well last season. He shot well the last few seasons. I think he shot 44% from three in Phoenix. Thibs plays Payne or somebody gets hurt. Payne shoots really well and he's impactful in that role. But make no mistake, my opinion is grounded in who do I think is most likely to do those things well. So do you disagree with that at all? Or do you think, are you with me there? Would you say?
Am I with you in terms of the key attributes for the player who plays with the second unit behind Jalen Brunson should primarily be good at shooting, connective passing, and defense? I agree with that. Yeah.
Right. So we've seen a lot of talk about table setting and running the offense. And this actually delves into a much deeper conversation. So first of all, the value of table setting in a vacuum. I don't think anybody denies that that's important, but what does it mean in a Thibs offense specifically? We know Thibs runs a pretty basic read and react offense with a few rules of, if you're off the ball, you either space or you set a flare screen. Sometimes you cut, but for the most part, it's a system that is hugely predicated on the lead ball handler being able to create offense by getting into the paint and create advantages. That's the start. You get a screen at the top of the key, usually by the center. Sometimes it's wing to guard or even guard to guard, but for the most part, it's the center setting the screen. And so I guess where I'd start is, are we even sure that the things most people mean when they say, oh, this guy's a true point guard, he likes to get the team into or he's able to get the team into their set earlier, yada, yada. Is that what is actually being applied by a true point guard at the Knicks point guard position? Because I would argue it probably isn't, but we were talking a little bit before the stream started, and I think maybe you disagree, or do you disagree with that?
No, I think traditionally we have this idea of like the true point guard or the floor general, where the point guard's the person who's responsible for first moving the ball up the court, then running the team's offense. They have to understand the game plan. They have to call specific plays, get the teams into those sets, get players in the right position, distribute the ball appropriately. Not always, but oftentimes the point guard is often viewed as like a pass first position. They're trying to get everybody else going. Yeah, so like I guess
Chris Paul is like the ultimate true point guard.
Exactly. That's what we think of the point guard. So to me, I think, my viewpoint is just sort of different in that I think that as basketball becomes less and less positional and more positionless, like the player that initiates the offense is less frequently the point guard. And once you go into a second unit situation, like we're talking about with, Cam Payne versus Deuce McBride or Tyler Kolek even, it really depends on the other skill sets that you have out there. Like that's really what it's all about. Primary initiators are the ones who have the ball in their hands and initiate the offense, whether they're looking to score for themselves or set up teammates. And regardless, they have the ball. They're looking to create some sort of advantage by either, leveraging their own abilities and the threat level of their teammates on the court. So they need to have threatening teammates in order to best maximize their own ability to create advantages. So that's how I think of it. The part that I'm just like, would want to hear from you and hear from others is, how important is it for a player to kind of get a team into a set, so to speak? So it's like, you're getting the ball up the court. You have to get everybody in the right position. You have to make sure the spacing's right. You have to make sure everybody's in the right spot. And then you have to kind of initiate the set by making the correct pass that triggers all the other things that happen as a part of the set. To me, like you said, for my eye, it doesn't seem like that's super, super important in the Knicks offense, because oftentimes it's like a high pick and roll, a spread pick and roll action, or Julius Randle's getting the ball in the post and creating from there. But at the same time, I don't have clean data on it. Like, I don't know how often the Knicks are running sets that require someone to set them up in that way. And that clean data would really allow me to have a stronger position on like how important that is for the Knicks offense, especially with their second unit. That's going to include guys who are going to be primary initiators, Mikal Bridges and Julius Randle. And with the ability to stagger with Brunson and those two other guys, and even guys like Dante DiVincenzo and OG Anunoby, who once, reportedly wanted more opportunity to run offense. It's just like they have a great number of secondary creators who can initiate offense. So to me, it's like, I would just want to know the data on how often the Knicks require a player like that. But at the same time, I don't think it actually matters with respect to what my opinion would be on a competition between Cam Payne and Deuce McBride, because I think Deuce McBride is much better a player than Cam Payne. And like you said, I agree that the things that would be most necessary with the second unit for the Knicks will be shooting, connected passing, and defense. And Deuce McBride is better at all three of those things than Cam Payne. So it's almost like a moot point to some extent. Like, it wouldn't change my perspective, but I would want to have an understanding of that data to kind of be able to be more strongly in the camp of like, well, it doesn't even matter if Cam Payne is better at that than Deuce McBride, and how much better he is at that than Deuce McBride is an open question in of itself. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. That's my position.
Right. I think the macro theoretical discussion is much more interesting than the actual Knicks discussion, because as many people have pointed out, Cam Payne signed a 1-year, $3 million deal. it's unlikely he's been brought in to supplant Deuce McBride.
Yeah.
It would actually be much more likely that Tyler Kolek just impressed Knicks brass so much in summer league that they gave him a chance in preseason and then he carried that over. I think that's probably a more likely outcome.
Yeah.
But to answer your original question about how much it matters, I think you nailed it. I think it's relative. You brought up a great stat before we hopped on here. The Timberwolves ran 60% of their offense in the half court in the playoffs. 60% of their sets were organized sets. So why did we see that?
Organized offense is what they were termed.
Right,
I don't know if they were organized set, but yeah, go ahead.
Why did we see the Timberwolves have almost certainly their most successful season since 2004 when they made the Western Conference Finals? Can we say that Mike Conley, the true point guard, Mike Conley, helping them become more organized and do what Chris Finch wants to do, played a big part in that? I don't think it would be unreasonable if anybody wanted to make that argument. I think that is like a relative example of when that skill set mattered. But I think that's the thing that is being missed here. How much is this skill set even going to matter? That needs to be addressed. You know, we've talked about, you can make an exaggerated example that'll probably upset some people because they'll be like, oh, it's not apples to apples, but it's like Peyton Pritchard made a couple half court shots in the NBA Finals. If I was like, well, yeah, I mean, Derek White's good, but does he have the half court? Is he as good at half court shots as Peyton Pritchard? The conversation would just end. People would be like, yeah, who cares? That doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I agree. So what we need to do is figure out how much each skill set is going to correlate with impact and then dive into it that way. You can't just say, oh, well, here's this thing that he's good at, like, and just leave it there. It doesn't just, like, how can we translate it to the macro? That is always has to be the full discussion. You know, if you ask Naya tomorrow, do you want Italian or Mexican? And you were like, I want Mexican. And she was like, yeah, but this Italian restaurant has chicken parm. Okay, what do we do with that? Like, I don't want chicken parm. I've thought about it. I've thought about this. Do you want chicken parm? Do you think that's more valuable? Is that better for your health? What is the reason that you're pointing this out? Why does this matter? So, in my opinion, to steelman the dissenting position, if you're going to argue that being a true point guard matters, you have to be able to prove, or at least make the argument, that how the Knicks will run the offense in these bench lineups when Jalen Brunson isn't playing will differ whether it's Deuce McBride out there or whether it's Cam Payne or Tyler Kolek. You have to be able to prove that. You have to be able to say, I think with Deuce McBride out there, he's not a true point guard. He's not good at that skill, So when Deuce McBride is on the court with these guys, they're going to overlean on Julius Randle, and it's going to hurt the offense. They're not going to get into their sets as fast. Deuce McBride's going to play off ball more because he's not a true point guard. Whereas Thibs is going to recognize Kolek or Cam Payne as a more true point guard, put the ball into their hands more, and offense is going to run more fluidly. You have to be able to make that point. Otherwise, the skill set might as well be half-court shooting, because unless the skill set is going to translate to impact, it's almost irrelevant.
I think that's the big point to me, is the one that you just made. Like, how will the way that the team plays fundamentally differ depending on who plays that backup guard spot? That's what matters. That's the whole thing. That's the whole argument. And if the argument is they'll play way differently, like you just said, then you would have to also make the case that that's better for them. You would have to make the case that's like,
I didn't even say that.
Yeah, you'd have to make the case that, like, no, if Payne is out there, if Kolek is out there, they're going to run it through them, and they're going to run more sets, and they're going to get guys into their spots. Is that better for them than just having a better, more talented player out there in Deuce McBride, a guy who's better on both ends of the court as a supplementary additive player, a guy who can make, the rest of their secondary initiators or primary initiators who are on the court at that given point in time, Mikal Bridges and Julius Randle, better than they would be if they were to have, alongside them, theoretically, Tyler Kolek, who knows how good that guy is. It's hard to even say at this point, but definitely than Cam Payne. So that's the big question. And once you answer that question, I think you have your answer. It feels very binary to me. The only thing I would add or interject into that is, I think there could be a notion of, for Thibodeau, we know he feels comfortable having a rim protector on the court at all times. He wants to be able to know that he can funnel players to the rim if he needs to, and there's a rim protector there waiting to defend the rim, to defend easy shots in the paint, which is often a really good thing. He has that as like a uniform rule at all times. He wants that to be able to be the case. That seems to be the case for him.
Yep.
Is it possible that he also believes it's really important to always have a quote unquote true point guard out there, a guy who can get into sets, not because it's going to fundamentally change the way that they play, but that's an option that he'd always like to have as like a fail switch. We're not running good offense. Randle's not able to create out of the post. I want us to get into some better sets. I need a guy who's going to be able to establish that up front, who's going to bring the ball up and be able to get me into the sets that I want to. And if he's not able to do that, then that's a big flaw. It's a big hole in my offense, and I don't feel comfortable with that. It is possible that Thibs feels that way. And even though it's on the net, not a positive trade-off, which I don't believe you can really make the case that it is possible that that just makes him feel comfortable. And he's not going to do things that don't make him feel comfortable.
So yeah, you landed on two awesome points there. That was great. The first is about trade-offs. I want to touch on that. We talked about with clone theory, in January when Randle went down, one of the examples we used is, would the Knicks offense be better if they had OG Anunoby and Julius Randle with the starting lineup, or two OG Anunobys? And you can just say, the same way people are saying, well, Cam Payne is a true point guard in the way Deuce isn't. You can say all these things that Julius Randle can do offensively that OG Anunoby can't. That is inarguable. We all watch it. We can all see it. And the stats back that up. As an individual player, there are things Julius Randle can do with the ball in his hands that OG Anunoby can't do. We need to dispel this notion that automatically means better. More doesn't always mean better. You have to consider all the trade-offs.
The argument would be like, just to like bolster the point, the argument would be like, oh, how can you say they'd be better with a second OG Anunoby? Julius Randle's a better primary initiator. Period. And it's like, yes, that does not equal that. We can't logically deduce that from the fact that he's a better primary initiator, the team would be better with him on the court than a second OG Anunoby. So yeah,
exactly. You cannot know that for sure. I'm not saying that the OG Randle answer isn't right. I'm just saying we don't know 100% that because Randle is better at this skill, that means it's better for team offense in this context. If you were starting a team and trying to build the best possible offense, or maybe you had a team that had, like, I don't know, this team we said last week that would be awesome for Julius Randle, Derek White and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, OG Anunoby, and Brook Lopez. If those were your four starters, I think it's unequivocal you'd rather have Julius Randle, and the offense would be better if you had Julius Randle than a second OG Anunoby. I think that's obvious. But in this specific context, with Brunson already existing, it's at least reasonable to think that just another OG Anunoby would be better for team offense, having more space, having the ball in Brunson's hands more. That's a good thing. So when you talk to reel this back in and go back to the true point guard aspect of it, when you talk about the skill set of being a true point guard, and table setting and all that stuff, you have to consider the trade-offs. Does Cam Payne and Tyler Kolek, whoever's in there, their skill edge there in terms of being a true point guard and getting the team into their offense more, would Thibs put the ball in their hands more to the point that it takes the ball out of Randle and Bridges' hands a little bit? Is it possible that would actually hurt team offense? Is that possible? You have to consider that possibility. And the second thing I would ask is, can you identify a threshold? Like, what if the Knicks, instead of having Deuce McBride, they were able to trade for Alex Caruso? I think Alex Caruso is more of a quote-unquote true point guard than Deuce McBride is, but I don't think he's a true point guard. He's always played off LeBron. Like, do you think the Thunder fans right now are like, yeah, Caruso's great, but we need to get someone next to him who can run the sets when Shea's not out there? There's no chance. There's no chance that that's a conversation that's happening.
Or else they would have kept Josh Giddey.
They would have kept Josh Giddey, right, exactly. So is there a threshold where it's like, okay, well, yeah, the skill set matters, but it doesn't matter if you're this impactful, and Deuce isn't at that threshold? These are things you need to identify. I'm not even saying it's wrong. I'm just trying to, again, strengthen the dissenting view, because there's been none of this in the conversations. It's only been surface level. It's just been, well, I mean, I can see it. Cam Payne and Tyler Kolek are more true point guards than Deuce McBride. How do we extrapolate that? And these are all areas that matter in terms of having that conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think identifying a threshold is critical, right? Like to me, that's a really important in testing first principles. So I think that's such an important point because you might say, and we do this a lot. We might give an extreme hypothetical and be like, well, what if this was to happen? And everybody'd be like, well, it's not that situation. But the point is to demonstrate that you would have a point where everyone would agree. Everyone would say, yeah, no, Caruso's so much better than Cam Payne. It'd be silly to have Cam Payne out there. But it's like, okay, then you agree that this skill set of true point guard is not like the difference maker in terms of saying I would play this player over the other because he's a true point guard. You would say there are other factors that are necessary to consider. And all we're saying is that considering those factors, at least for me, and it seems like for you, Deuce McBride is clearly going to be more additive to the Knicks' success when in the second unit, especially in situations where Julius Randle and Mikal Bridges are on the court. Which that's another question, an open question in terms of how Thibs will stagger. But I feel like Jalen Brunson is such an offense unto himself that would make sense to try to have Mikal Bridges and Julius Randle on the court together when Brunson is off the court, as opposed to having, one or the other, only Randle and having, Mikal Bridges and Brunson be sitting at the same time, or only Bridges and have Brunson and Randle be sitting at the same time. That's an open question as to whether that's going to happen or not.
So you actually raise a really interesting point there, because there's only one way to do that. You know that, right? There's only one way to have Randle and Mikal Bridges both on the court with the bench unit. There's only one way, because who else belongs to the bench unit? Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. Mm-hmm. Those guys are both playing. He's not going to go to an 8-man rotation.
Well, it's just to pull. It's just to pull one of them early. To pull Mikal, if you pull Mikal Bridges early and you throw mm-hmm. DiVincenzo out there, then when Brunson comes off the court, Bridges can come back in the game, right?
So DiVincenzo is going to play 6 minutes a half.
Why would he play 6 minutes a half? I'm saying
Thibs doesn't do multiple shifts for bench players.
Yeah, he doesn't. That's okay. Well, that's the thing that's going to have to change, right?
He's not going to change it. I've been talking about it for 4 years. He's not going to change it. Count on your guys. Take a shot this season. How many times a bench player plays multiple shifts and a half? Just do it. Just have fun. If you're sober, you can play this game. You don't. He doesn't do it. If you're a bench player, you come in the game and you either finish the half or you come out and you're done. There are very specific, like, random outlier examples, like foul trouble or somebody gets hurt. But in the macro, Thibs does not play bench players multiple shifts and a half. It doesn't. So, in my opinion, the only way to get this bench unit that you want with Bridges and Randle and then Hart and DiVincenzo and Deuce is to go small. And that brings us to another interesting question. Are the Knicks going to raise the minutes floors for their player by introducing that to the rotation? I mean, I know you're skeptical. I'm skeptical, but I think they have to do it.
I'm exceedingly skeptical about this. I think, if they have the roster that they currently have, that gives them the best opportunity to do it, because you're basically saying I'm going to trade Jericho Sims minutes for Dante DiVincenzo minutes, or trade Dante DiVincenzo minutes for Jericho Sims minutes, which I don't feel like anybody can justifiably get away with doing. So if this is the current iteration of the roster, along with the fact that we know Mitchell Robinson's probably not going to be playing 32, 35 minutes a game. That's very unlikely, along with the fact that Mitchell Robinson's probably not going to be playing 82 basketball games in the season. That makes it, in my opinion, if they keep this roster, that almost has to happen for some amount of time during the regular season. At the same time, would I be completely shocked and floored if it didn't? Probably not. I wouldn't be, Jericho. I can imagine Jericho Sims playing 27 minutes in some random games in November if it came down to it.
Can you imagine the Hot Hand Theory episode when Mitch gets hurt and Sims and Precious Achiuwa play all 48 center minutes? I will just be on here like staring into space, like, what the hell? Yeah, man. I do think that we can put a bow in this conversation, because I hope we've done a good job of trying to argue both sides. one hypothetical that people have brought up a lot, shout out Kevin Danishevsky, this is all setting up for the Knicks to improve at backup center and give Thibs the second true point guard that he wants. And I'm curious how you would feel about that and what the threshold, and if you're sort of against it off the cuff, what the threshold for the backup center is, to the point where if they lose Deuce, if the Knicks lose Deuce, who is like the worst player where you would be like, okay, we're going from Deuce to Cam Payne or Tyler Kolek, but we know Thibs doesn't want to go small, and now we've got 48 minutes. Like, is Nick Richards enough? Does it have to be Walker Kessler?
It's got to be Kessler. It's got to be Kessler. Yeah. Nick Richards is not. If they do it for Nick Richards, that's a catastrophe, in my opinion. It's just not sufficient. And I know Deuce McBride shooting is going to potentially come down a little bit. I think he's going to be a better player. I think he's going to be a better player. I won't even say it'll definitely come down. I think it will come down. But he shot 41% from 3 last year. He's a really good shooter. He also shot 86% from the free throw line on very few attempts, but when the free throw shooting and 3-point shooting matches up, his G League 3-point shooting has always been good. His 3-point shooting in college was good. Like, I don't know that he's just not a 40% 3-point shooter. I think it will come down. I'm guessing I would pencil him in at around 38% is what I would say. But I think he's going to be a better player overall. I think his defense is going to improve. I think his defensive impact metrics will like him a lot better. If he's doing stuff poorly off the ball, you and I have talked about this. His on-ball defense has been great. If he's doing stuff poorly off the ball, he'll shore that up most likely. So I just think he'll be a better player. So you have to factor that in. Him being who he is already, being potentially better than that on the contract that he's on, I don't think you could just give that away and say, but we need positionally, we need to have, a guy that just fits a specific archetype. That just doesn't feel like a good move to me. So it's got to be Walker Kessler, a guy at that level or better, which there's not anybody else on the market that I know of. Maybe there are guys that are kind of, their teams have them for sale in a way. But to my knowledge, it's Walker Kessler. So it's got to be like Kessler or better, in my opinion.
And this is the thing. If you are out there and your perspective is this team can win a championship, which it should be, that we've said that a number of times, this is a championship team. And you're saying, look, you can't quibble over, Deuce McBride. That can't be the line with a championship team. Get Thibs what he wants. Thibs wants 48 minutes of true center. Go get him that second true center, and you live with the quote unquote downgrade from Deuce McBride to Cam Payne. I'm not going to tell you that perspective is wrong. You're going for it, you go for it. What I will say though, they got to win. That's what you got to do. You can't just keep sacrificing assets and then there's no expectations. There have to be real expectations for this team, and we're going to keep repeating that because, first of all, we have real expectations for this team, but it just feels like we're on this endless merry-go-round of, oh, well, we need this, and then we need this, and we need this. And it's like, or maybe they don't need any of these things, and there's a different conversation to be had. But let's have that conversation. Let's cross that bridge when we get there. It's July. I think this has been a great conversation. Honestly, I'm really proud that we were able to keep it under a half an hour, and I think we were really efficient in how we talked about everything.
Totally agree. I think this is a good conversation. If you have comments, feedback, you disagree with us, drop a comment below. Our comment section has been freaking awesome lately. And, Geoff and I interact with literally every comment that's there. And we're having really good, thoughtful, kind of a lot of decency involved in our discussions with people disagreeing, but kind of doing it in a respectful and reasonable way. So we want to keep fostering that. So please keep dropping comments with your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with us, and we respond, and hopefully we can engage and come up with some new perspectives as well. But I think it was a good conversation, Geoff. I'm glad we jumped on here to do it. Unless you have anything else to say, anything left? Okay. All right. Geoff's going to go get drunk, like he does every day. And, no, he does not do that every day. I'm sorry. But yeah, this has been another Hot Hand Mini.